From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm News Channel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. Tennessee voters have spoken in their primary elections on Thursday. What does it mean, and what lies ahead with the general election this fall and the presidential race looming as well? To give us some wisdom and insight on that, we're happy to welcome back to our show Dr. Thomas Schwartz, a history and political science professor at Vanderbilt University. Dr. Schwartz, it's always nice to have you with us. Thank you for joining us again.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the program.
Here in Tennessee, Bill Hagerty, the former ambassador to Japan, former state economic and development commissioner, won the Republican nomination to take Lamar Alexander's place in the U.S. Senate. He won by a somewhat larger margin than I think people had anticipated. Hagerty was the choice of President Trump. He endorsed him. Did that endorsement, you think, was the key difference in having him win the nomination?
I actually think so. I think Hagerty having Trump behind him was very important. It did get close. There was the poll that showed only a 3-point difference, and it certainly gave a certain momentum to Manny Sethi. Hagerty came after him as Massachusetts Manny, and he did sort of highlight this idea that he wasn't really a Tennessean, and using some praise that Sethi had done for the Obamacare and other things. It was an unusual race. The Massachusetts stuff, as someone who lived in Massachusetts for a number of years, sort of got me a little bit as to how you can tag someone that way. And my friends in Massachusetts got a big kick out of it. But I still... I think in a way that the Trump endorsement was key. There was so little difference in any other way between these two candidates.
Yeah, the two candidates didn't disagree on any policy issues. It seems to be a new thing in contentious Republican primaries, is to say, I'm the true conservative and the other guy isn't, and that's what they fight about, not about any policy issues at all.
Well, true conservative, or I'm Trump's man. That was the whether you see conservatism as identical with Trump is a key question, because there was a third candidate in here, Dr. I'm blanking on his name
Flynn,
now.
George Flynn.
George Flynn, who made the case he was a true conservative, but he wasn't Trump's man. He was independent. That sort of thing is that is also an issue. But it's pretty clear in this case that Tennessee Republicans are loyal to President Trump.
Did, in some ways, Hagerty sort of copy President Trump? I mean, President Trump's modus operandi that worked very well for him in 2016 was to give his opponent a nickname. And Hagerty had more money. He had a lot more attack ads, I thought, on Sethi than Sethi had on him, although the airways were filled from all over the places, including outside PAC ads. But yes. Was that one of the key differences, that maybe Hagerty was better financed, had more attack ads, and his attack ads perhaps at the end particularly were more effective?
All of that is certainly the case. Again, there were no substantial differences. This really was a case, I think, maybe of testing President Trump's overall popularity within Tennessee, and he still is certainly popular among Republicans and likely to carry the state in November.
The GOP primary here in Tennessee was labeled by Politico as the nastiest GOP primary in the nation. Any lasting wounds from this? Do you believe the Republicans will be united in the fall in this Senate race? Already you can see Hagerty wanting to be united not just behind him, but behind President Trump. He's going to continue to make Trump a big deal.
I don't really foresee this one really leading to any sort of permanent divisions. This is not... the numbers and everything really called for, this is not, the Democrats aren't really planning to contest this one, at least according to the latest.
Tennessee has a history of having moderates in the Senate, whether you're talking about Howard Baker, Lamar Alexander, Fred Thompson, Bill Frist. But with Marcia Blackburn's election 2 years ago, we've seen it go a little bit more towards the right on that, a little bit more on the conservative side. Is that a sign that Tennessee voters want to be more conservative? They don't want somebody up there who's maybe the deal maker or the person who tries to bring people together up there. They want somebody who's going to be more of an advocate for what they want on various policy issues? It
does seem to be that the base support for a much more hardline conservative candidate is certainly there. It used to be, a Baker or Lamar Alexander could draw support from Tennessee Democrats. The Tennessee Democratic Party seems to have moved left to a certain extent, and in general, the strongest voices in the Tennessee Republican Party are the conservative and pro-Trump voices.
Ambassador Hagerty is going to face Makita Bradshaw. She's a Memphis activist, African-American. She was a surprise winner What happened to Mackler, James Mackler? He was supposed to be the choice of many of the Democratic leaders in the party, yet he finished third. What happened?
Well, I think in a way, even though Mackler certainly fit many of the progressive ideals, I think in this way he was outdone by what is, I think, a move among many Democrats, catalyzed in part by the George Floyd killing, to move further left, to want to be more diverse. Memphis provided a strong base of support. So I think in that sense, there were a lot of reasons why he wasn't able to prevail. The other thing is, of course, there were 4 candidates. So that sort of took off some of his support, too, as well.
Tennessee Democrats haven't won a U.S. Senate race since 1990 when Al Gore was reelected. Any reason to believe that Marquita Bradshaw is going to make any difference? Is she going to do any better than the Democrats have done the last 30 years?
I think she'll do better, probably relative, especially if the national mood and the national popular vote mood is more pro-Biden. She might get lifted a bit by his coattails in some ways, or she might also be able to turn out voters here, but I don't think she'll win.
Normally in this sort of situation, a candidate who's underdog looks for the National Party to come in and help them, but the National Democratic Party has so many opportunities in the Senate, she probably would be well down, and Tennessee will probably be well down on the list, and where it usually is, but particularly this year.
Yes, there are just a number of key battleground states, North Carolina, Iowa, Maine, that are drawing much more Democratic financial and other support. I just can't see that they would devote a great deal of resources to this state. In
terms of the AfricanAmerican energy in the community out there, there's an AfricanAmerican activist here in Davidson County, Keita Haynes, who made long-term Congressman Jim Cooper work pretty hard for his reelection. He did win, but she got about 40%, a little bit more of the vote Thursday night. Does her showing mean that we're going to see even more activism coming, or is that sort of the end of it? They've made their statement and they're maybe not going to show up as much in the polls, or we're going to see even more come out in November?
I don't think it's over by any stretch. I think this really is a movement, and I think you're going to see continuing efforts by progressives to try to dominate the Tennessee Democratic Party and push the party in that direction. It may have a problem. The one issue there is, of course, that it could also lose some seats in the process. Cooper still has strong bipartisan, to a certain extent, bipartisan support. But I do think he may face another primary challenge in 2022 if he decides to stay in.
Of course, he may be running in a very different district in 2022. After the census, there's going to be a reapportionment of all the states, and it seems to be pretty strongly this time that the Republicans who dominate the General Assembly are going to draft up and take Davidson County, maybe divide it up into 3 or 4 different districts, and perhaps put Congressman Cooper in a district that he may have a tough time being able to win. And while it may look like Nashville's going to have 2 or 3 congressmen, they may not have one that actually lives in Davidson County. Do you think that's the biggest challenge he faces going into this next term in Congress?
That probably is. I suspect, though, that state Republicans might want to draw his district and keep him in. He is someone that they've been able to work with in the past better, and they may not want to. They may figure that they still have a dominance in the congressional delegation and continue to basically segment off both Memphis and Nashville as the 2 Democratic seats.
Dr. Thomas Schwartz is our guest. He's a Vanderbilt University professor of both history and political science. We've been talking about the local races and what happened in the Thursday election. Now we'll go more national in our next segment. Stay with us on Inside Politics.